Now, there's one more thing I want to tell you that will be helpful to you in dealing with these class of problems, and that is you recall that under Section 2-201, subsection 2, that even between merchants, that an added term will be excluded if it materially alters the agreement. So some examples of what does and does not constitute a material alteration would be useful, and I'm going to show you some examples now that come directly from the UCC, the comments of the UCC. These are examples of material and non-material alterations found in 2-207 sub 2. In material alterations, some examples are found in comment 4 of 2-207 sub 2. And under comment 04, it first of all tells us that an alteration which creates surprise or hardship is certainly more likely to be treated as material than one that does not. Also, disclaiming warranties of 2-314 or 2-315 will be treated as a material alteration. 2-314 warranties are the ones that say that the product is impliedly warranted to be fit for ordinary use, fit for whatever ordinary use was intended, that it is adequately labeled, adequate instructions, adequate warnings, that the contents conform to what the label says it is. All those kinds of implied warranties are contained in 2-314. And if you make an offer to me and I accept your offer and say disclaiming all warranties, that's pretty serious stuff. And that will be treated as a material alteration and will not be included. In fact, disclaiming all warranties is so serious that you should seriously raise the issue as to whether or not an acceptance which disclaims all warranties is really an acceptance. That might be a bad acceptance. In other words, not a sufficient showing of an expression of acceptance. So this is a material alteration. 2-315 says that is the warranty that the product is fit for any particular purpose for which it was claimed to be fit. Another material alteration occurs if the time to complain is much shorter than industry standards. And that's self-explanatory. Industry standards are important here. Another example of a material alteration is when the seller's right to terminate, the seller reserves the right to terminate for any late payment. Now it's a little hard for you to read this, so I'll repeat this here at the board, that if the seller retains the right to terminate the contract for any late payment, okay, that's pretty serious, and it's too serious. And it's so serious that that's considered a material alteration. Some examples which are not material alterations from the UCC are found here. Comment number 5 has examples of non-material alterations. One is extending UCC 2-615. Now UCC 2-615 is the one that we deal with regarding commercial impracticability. That is to say, I couldn't deliver the goods because of some unforeseen circumstances that completely made it almost impossible for me to deliver them. Commercial impracticability. And so someone who's in a particular industry may be aware of some additional events which happen from time to time that make it commercially impracticable for them to perform. And they may want to add something to that list, list some items which constitute extending the 2-615 to certain events that they know happen from time to time. So the commercial impracticability extension is a non-material alteration. An addition which simply says you got to pay balance on the amount owed, and if the balance is within industry standards, not exceeding them, but reasonable based on the industry standards, that's not a material alteration. Limiting the right to reject goods within the industry standards, and what I mean by that is that normally if you're buying goods, a lot of goods, that some of them may be defective, and a certain percentage of defects is perhaps, whatever the standard of this industry is, it will be acceptable. But if you reserve the right to reject goods so long as they are within industry standards of the kinds of things you can reject, that would be a non-material change. Whereas actually comment number 4, another comment that's not on the board, points out that if you try to change what goods you will accept or reject, and your new specs are much tighter than industry standards, that's a material alteration. But to require that the goods fit into industry standards is not a material alteration. Those are examples right in the UCC itself. I'll give you a couple of examples that appeared on bar examinations. In this example, you wanted to buy a turbine. I make and sell turbines. I made a deal with you over the telephone, and the deal is all settled now, and so we have a contract. And then you send me a written confirmation of that contract. And now you recite the terms that we agreed on the telephone, no problem, and you didn't recite any terms that contradict what we said on the telephone, because those would be void. But you included several terms that we did not talk about on the telephone. This is a real bar question. One of the things that you said in your acceptance, besides the things that we agreed to on the phone, one of the things that you said in your acceptance was that all changes must be in writing. Well, this was a $500,000, a $500,000 turbine contract. And saying that if you want to make some modifications, they need to be in writing, that's not surprising. That doesn't create a surprise, and it doesn't create a hardship. It's what you would want in any case. A second additional term was one that said that the usual warranties shall apply. The usual warranties shall. Well, the usual warranties, it makes it sound like it was not a surprise because they do business all the time, and including the usual warranties would probably not create a hardship, and so that would be a non-material change. It's not surprise, and it's quite reasonable. It's within the industry standards. An additional term that was included in your written confirmation to me, besides the one that says the usual warranties apply and all changes must be in writing, the next one you put in there was a liquidated damages clause. You said to me that I should pay you $1,000 a day liquidated damages for late performance. And so is that a material alteration? Will that be included or not? And you look to this. Was it surprise? Was it hardship? And say something about maybe it's a material alteration, maybe it's not. You could say, for example, that this is a surprise. And if these people have been doing business on these terms right along, then the $1,000 a day liquidated damages clause is not a surprise. But the facts didn't say that, so it looks like the $1,000 a day liquidated damages clause was a surprise, and it might create a hardship depending on other factors. On the other hand, you can argue that based on the size of the contract, that $1,000 a day might be a reasonable liquidated damages clause and would not create an unreasonable hardship. What you would do is you'd point out what a liquidated damages clause is. That's a case where if there's a breach later on, we believe now that we would not be able to determine what the damages were because it'd be hard to figure it out at that time. So we negotiate damages right now. If there's a breach, here's what the damages are. Here's the formula for determining damages. And so if we have one of these liquidated damages clause where we put in the damages shall be $1,000 a day, well, if that is a valid liquidated damages clause, and we won't go into what makes them valid right now, if that was a valid liquidated damages clause, it might be a hardship. But if the liquidated damages clause turned out to be invalid, then of course it's not a hardship at all. So say something on both sides of that. So the three in the turbine, the three additional factors were the liquidated damages clause, all the usual warranties apply, and any changes must be in writing. The one other case that I'll recite for you when this happened on the bar is the case where you made a offer to me, and I accepted, and in my acceptance, I say arbitration. Say, in case of a dispute, we must agree now that we will arbitrate rather than litigate. Well, is that a material alteration or not a material alteration? Again, you apply the standards of surprise and hardship. Here are some examples. And it turns out that whether or not an arbitration clause is or is not a material alteration, there's a split of authority on that. So that's how you would deal with that. That, frankly, is everything I can think of that you want to know about 2-207. And it is tested. You do need to know this material. This is everything you need to know. At this point, I would hope they ask you a question about 2-207 because you know more than you need to know about it. That is the end of this lecture.